Hi, welcome to Angel's Nook. Furniture is just the beginning. Be prepared to be inspired by a wide range of projects and finishing techniques. Hi, welcome to Angel's Nook. Today I'm going to be working on a piece of decor that I found it on clearance after Christmas last year. And it was already thrown in the 75% off table, but someone had knocked it to the floor and broken this piece off. So the manager agreed to give it to me for a couple of dollars. And for a couple of bucks I thought, I can make this into something that looks really cute. This is very plasticky, so this is going to come off. And then I'm going to glue this back on, and use some wood putty to fill in on it. Those are the first steps that are going to happen with this. And hopefully then, by the time I get this done, one of the reasons I liked it was it's pretty lightweight. It's made out of pressed cardboard, but once I get it finished, painted, it'll be safe to hang on my front door for the holiday season, or sitting outside in the front by my chairs, or indoors somewhere. Actually, I may wind up with it by the fireplace, but it's going to have a lot of different options. And I also plan to work on this so that it could also be a fall piece of decor, and maybe even going all the way through winter into February as a piece of decor, depending on what's on it. These pieces are very, very cheap. They're very hard plastic. So all of those are going to get pulled off. They were just stapled on here. And I'm going to, before I'm done, make this piece so that there is a way to put seasonal decor pieces on this that are not just Christmas, and so it can be used for a variety of different purposes. And all of that will get discarded. I will get that off in a few minutes, probably off camera. This, normally painting with HTP, I wouldn't need to sand it all, just degloss. But the way that they put on this Winter Wonderland and these pieces, it's raised in different areas, and I do not want to see that with the finish that I want to do. So once I get this glued and it dries, and the wood putty is dried and I'm ready to sand the wood putty, I will come back and do a variety of repairs here. I'll go ahead and put some glue under there. Put that back on there. I will also be taking this rope off of here, and I have this out to help me make sure that as this is drying, I do have this laid flat and level, which it is. This is a light activated super weld by JB Weld, which holds a lot of things really well. It's soaked into the cardboard, but the additional that I added is acting as a bond between those two sides. The glue requires about 10 seconds of the light to get a really good hard bond. Now I'm going to get this smooth from the damage that was on it. Okay. I'm going to let this dry, and off camera I'm also going to go ahead and remove the rope off of this because it's just going to be in the way while I'm working. And a sled, as we all know, this is cute, the white with the red and the white and black here, but a rope that children had been pulling over time wouldn't be pure white like this. So that's going to have some work done on it too before it's done. Off camera, additional glue was put into all sides of this repair, getting down into the grooves and all to really help stabilize this. I also off camera, besides what you saw on camera of adding wood putty here, I added some where all the staples were holding that really fake greenery onto here. So now I'm going to take my 220 grit. All those are smooth. And now I'm going to smooth this. Now to keep this level where this is all raised, I'm going to use a block. This is sandpaper around a piece of plastic. This did not require sanding in order to paint it. It required sanding in order to level out the wood putty and to get rid of this raised pattern that was spray painted on here. Let's see, the spot right there, it's not all the way down. The block was working to some degree, but I can get a lot more pressure on these particular little pieces of design with my fingertips. I'm going to use just a damp paper towel to wipe off that dust, that paint from the sanding. Now, because I have the wood putty on here, if I try to just start painting over this wood putty, or if I try to degloss over the wood putty without sealing it first, it's going to lift out. It's going to reactivate with the additional moisture and it's going to lift out. But if I spray these areas with spray shellac, it's going to seal them. I can do a light sand on them so it's nice and smooth like this. When it's done, then I can degloss and start painting the whole thing, the base colors that I need to work on. This has been sprayed with spray shellac. Do we have that can handy, Jen? It's the Zenzer Bullseye Shellac. It's just the clear. Most of the time you have no need to actually invest in the Ben's primer shellac that is white. This is very simple to use, and now this is going to get deglossed. My brush is wrapped with some paint on it because I actually used the brush off camera to stir the little bit of tapestry that I have left in here, because there's just really, this job is probably going to be the last thing that I use this jar of tapestry for. The top of this is cut like wood. The underneath is not, but I still want to put finish on the underneath for where I want a wood look. And I'm using a small brush to apply this. Because it's much easier to get into all of these tight spaces. Just like if you've left your doors on with a cabinet, when you're painting it, you need to use an art brush to get in there. I'm using a base coat of tapestry before I begin working on the faux finish for the wood, because staying over this red just would not produce a good finish. That red would come through and not be appropriate for what I want. To get the edges of this before I do the very top. And I just realized I need to go back to the back side for a second after I get this done. I want to make sure I roll this top. So I don't have layers on there. I forgot that I need to do the back side of this one, this part, because that will also be wood look. And again, I am smoothing out that paint that got onto the front while I was doing the back. Small brush is really helpful too when you have grooves like this and anything, a piece of furniture, a cabinet door. Red is one of the hardest colors to cover, but you can see this is doing a good job. Let this dry, and it's probably going to need a second coat. Definitely will, because I can see some of the contrast of the white and red popping through this. But the second coat should be all it needs. And I see a couple of spots here that I'll finish off camera that I missed. One of the things that can happen after the stains have been opened and used and then you put them away is you open it and it will look like when you try to put a brush in or something that there's a hard surface on there. There is. This is a skin that forms over the top of oil-based products, and I have gone around the inside edge of the jar to loosen this all against the wall with a screwdriver, a straight edge screwdriver, and then just lift it out so that now I'm back down to the product, and I use that same screwdriver just to mix this up. I did the same thing to the other jar of stain off camera. This is normal for oil-based products. So the product isn't damaged, there's nothing wrong with it, it's still perfectly fine to use. It's just one of those things that happen, and it's actually kind of good that it forms that skin because oil-based products gas off. That's part of their drying process. The solvent comes out of it. So that skin over the top is keeping the product that's underneath perfect so that it's going to be able to be used. And I realized when I was doing this off camera that it's probably something that a lot of you are not familiar with stains, and that it would be good information for you to have. And you definitely want to go ahead and wipe down and get the stain off of the screwdriver that you've used, because it's not fun to get off later. On this particular piece, I debated back and forth over what I want the wood to look like in this. And most of the time, sleds over time have a grade aged look to them, so that's what I decided I wanted to do with this. So the first layer that I'm going to put on this is gray mist over this, so I'll get a little bit of the beiginess through, a little bit of the gray, almost greige of the gray mist, and then I'm going to add some tobacco. But on this right now, I'm purposely doing all of this first, because if it gets on to this other part, it's not a big deal because I'm going to paint all of this solid. And I know this isn't a real sled, but visually I'd like it to look more like a real sled. I'm also going to be working on the back of this first, because that's going to mean that when I turn it over, this is protected because of the height here, and I won't do any damage to this. If I did the front first, I'd either have to let it completely dry, or when I turn it over, I risk doing damage to the front, especially if, and it happens, if it flips out of your hand or whatever, all the effect you've done on the front is now ruined. I'm going to start with the gray mist. I'm not going to put much on my brush, and like I always do when I'm doing a finish like this, I pounce a lot of it off, and I'm just going to, the back is not going to look nearly as good as the front, simply because of how it's made, but at least if this flips over, it's not going to look like just a plain back here. You always want to start with your brush against an edge. You don't want to come into the edge trying to put this kind of dry brushing in. As long as you can, pick up paint off the plate. I'm sorry, stain off the plate. Across this top, the grain would go this way. I want to get the edges before I do the top. And the top of this one will be much easier to get the lines that I want. Because there's no crossbars interfering with my strokes down through this. If you like the Pottery Barn finish, but you're really wanting a little bit more gray tone into it, gray mist is perfect for doing that. Again, I'm going the direction that grain in this would be. While it's still wet, I want to blend in just a little bit of tobacco. And again, this back side, because of these spots on it where there are boards in the way, it's a little trickier to get in there. By doing it while this is still wet, the colors blend into each other a little bit. Not completely, they're still separate, but there's areas where they will blend in. On a cabinet door, just the gray mist over the tapestry would be really pretty. I'm turning my brush sideways so I can blend out some of the spots where that wanted to clump, because the other stain layer is already wanting to set because I have so little on there, which is why if you were doing this on a cabinet door, you definitely want to do both steps in sections. Center of your door first, and then each frame piece. It's probably difficult to see on the camera, but there's definitely some gray tone in this, even with the tobacco added over it. Now be careful and don't do what I almost did when you've got two stains out. Don't start to dip into the one you don't want. And I literally just got the tiniest amount of that onto my brush. But what I could see here was that down in the groove, nothing had gotten down into that particular groove, and it needs to have it in there. So now, this is ready to dry, and then I'll start working on the rest of the sled. Where this got too much brown on it from trying to get up against that piece, I'm going back with gray mist over those areas on the back. And you can see that took care of where that had too much brown. And I actually think while I have this out here, I kind of like how that looked here on camera. So yep, I'm liking adding just a little bit of gray back over the brown here on the front too. While all of this is still wet. It's also why it's kind of a good idea to try a practice run on these on the back of a door to see what you actually really like finally. And I like that finish a lot better for this sled. So now we're gonna let it dry. Thanks. One of the things, additional final things I wanna do to the wood look on the back of this is when it flips over like this, it's obvious that this is a solid piece of wood. You can see some markings down here. There's an indentation from where they had stamped it with a machine and I didn't see it. And since this is not going to be seen on the back usually, I'm not worried about going back and filling it with wood at this point, wood putty, and fixing it. But one of the things I do want to do for when this gets moved around is I want to make a line down through here to emulate these pieces on the front. This has a groove cut in, but on the back, it's wanting to stick to the finish that's not completely cured yet. So I'm going to line up my ruler to act as a guide, and I'm going to use a very small art brush and some vintage brown antiquing gel because it has a little bit of translucence, which is why you would not want to do this with a marker because a marker is going to go solid. It takes longer to do this with the antiquing gel, but I don't want just a solid hard line on here, which paint would do the same thing to me. I'm going to turn this around so I've got a better view here doing this, but you can see it's added an edge there, and I did not want it perfectly straight. I want it slightly non-uniform, which gives it more like a worn piece of wood edge. And I'm spinning my brush to bring this brush into a point. I'm rolling it so that it puts it back to a fine point. If you just put it in, it flattens it. And this brings it to a very, very fine point. So now, if this just flips over, it's tricking the eye long enough to look more like lines that are in the front of this. And now I need to clean off this ruler so that I've got a good straight edge for in the future. Thanks, Jim. And I just saw an area here that didn't have as much stain as I needed, and the antiquing gel was perfect for filling that in. The Irongate has been stirred off camera. You always want to stir your paint. These edges on the back here are going to be very, very difficult for you to see the process when I get into the really tight places against here. But I will see if I can figure out an angle here. Man, so that I don't go back down onto the wood. Maybe I've traded out this 1/2-inch brush for a 1/4-inch brush. It's a flat art brush that will allow me to get really tight in here. Sled runners can be black or red. I'm choosing that mine is going to be black for my home because red would be a very jarring color against my coastal home. But you most definitely could do this. The runner's all red. Painting something this small is more tedious. That's where having different size brushes helps you out a lot. I'm not going to the outside edges yet because those will be easy to get later. I'm less likely to run into them with my hand and wind up putting black where I don't want it, where I have put the faux wood. This will need a second coat. The second coat will go faster. So I won't have to get as close to the faux wood, because the shadow will be my friend and make that first coat look full. So I got up on there, I do want to smooth that. I'm going to flip this and get this side. Moving your brush back through it multiple times is a much better technique than trying to just take your brush one time down it with too much paint on your brush. That's where you're going to get smears. And the fiberboard that they used on this is not the smoothest, which is also making this take more time. I'll also, after this coat has dried, be able to clean up any of the little bobbles where that this material has wanted to pull the paint to make it bleed into spaces. And I've got a few other places here that I need to use the small brush. These areas don't matter because they're both going black. And this area isn't sitting against the wood. I'm sorry, the base. I'm double checking that every place that I need to use a small brush, it's been done, and I've got these places here on the front that also need it because they are right up against the faux wood. And I'm also smoothing that edge out, feathering it. So I don't get a lap line there. it's not going on as thickly as normal because I'm using this tiny art brush. And this first coat, I know it's trying to bleed, so I'm not putting as much paint on the brush. But the second coat will take care of that. I'm going to double check again that there's no place close that I need to do the paint. And now I can start with the 1/2" brush and apply a heavier coat of paint. Last strokes I'm going to do is smoothing it with my brush since I'm not stippling it. This is too narrow spaces to do any stippling. I'm not painting this upper part yet because it's something I need to be able to hold on to. And I'm barely touching this to smooth out those brush strokes. Now, this next step I just saw over here, where there's a smoothing that needs to happen, this is going to seem counterintuitive, but if you can see on here, there's overage on this side. If I went ahead and did the entire back before I finished this, I'd have really bad bumps of paint that would look bad on this. So I'm going to do this a section at a time and make sure that I get all sides of a piece. It's also why it's important to leave this unpainted right now and do it separately after all these other pieces have been painted and dried. And even like right now, I can get close to where I already painted with a small brush, but I don't have to. Piece of lint from somewhere. Get that off there. Now, the last thing I'm going to do, hopefully you can see some shinier here, I'm going to go back down these sides with my brush not full of paint to get rid of any of the overages that are wanting to show on that edge. So that now, when this dries, there won't be any ridginess on it. And that's the process that I will use for each one of these. And you kind of need to tip this into different light so that you can see that your brush strokes are smoothed and that you don't have globs of paint anywhere. But that's what I'm going to finish doing off camera to all of these pieces. But you can see why I want to do an entire piece at a time before I finish. This is completely dried off camera, and the black has 2 coats of Irongate. The back here, you can see that the lines helped. This down here, I'm really not worried about. It's a stamp into the wood behind this. This is not going to be sitting out displayed on this side. I just wanted something that quickly visually looked right when you would turn it over. And I really didn't want to spend the time of filling and sanding that for something that wasn't important. But now I want to finish it for how I want to use it as a decor piece, which could be on a door, it could be sitting, whatever. I'm going to add a black bow to it. You could put it pretty much anywhere you like, but I know what else I'm going to do with this piece. So for me, I like it a little bit off to the side so it's asymmetrical for what else I'm going to do. So I'm going to just use a glue gun, add that on there. And again, these wireless ones are really nice. Now, as this sits right now, this could be sitting out, if you wanted, year-round. But if you didn't, if you just wanted it as a holiday piece, one of the things that I have that I'm going to add to it for mine is I have a reindeer here, and the loop of this is perfect for me to not have to permanently put this on here. Because it's an ornament, it can just hang there for wherever I want to put it. But if I want to use it earlier than the holiday, for the Christmas holidays, I wanted you to see what a difference it makes depending on what size of something you use. This piece is very pretty as just a spray, and I have bent it so that it could be put on the back here and hang. It works, but it's a little bit large. By downsizing just a little bit with the size of the pumpkins, now there's a piece that's not as overwhelming, that can work through just the fall all the way through Thanksgiving, and then change this off to another piece. And the last option is not using all of this, but using a few sprays of this. I haven't cut it. And a smaller set of pumpkins like this. You could also later, for in January up through spring, when you're changing things out, you could, I'm gonna have to re-glue this because I moved it too many times. You could add something that is winter theme related onto this to make this work. I'm going to use, for my purposes, this particular one, and I want to add just a little bit to the pumpkins. Not much, but just to keep this from looking so much solid color. This is Stonehenge. And then I'm just going to brush up from what would have been the bottom of the pumpkin. And I'm going to do the same thing onto this orange pumpkin. It's not much. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. But it adds just a little bit more depth to these. It doesn't take but a minute or two to add it. This also then will tie back to the little bit of gray that I put into the sled. If you get too much, rub it off like I just did. There's something white on there. And now for me, I like it better. If you don't need it done, don't bother with it. But now, this piece, once I get the bow glued back on correctly, is ready for me to set out for the remainder of the fall season. And if you wanted to make these runners red, certainly you could. There's nothing that says you need to do it in black, but it works better for my home. So I hope you've enjoyed this and seen that there's some quick ways to make what looks like a piece of trash turn into something quite beautiful. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.